Genesis 17. And we've been talking about a man. He is the father of the children of Israel. What is his name?
Abraham.
Father Abraham. Yeah. Up till now, we've just seen his name as Abram, like Brother Lynn said, like Chris said. Abram was his name when we met him. We met him in Genesis chapter 12, or actually the end of Genesis 11, and we started learning more about him in Genesis 12. And what we've seen several times now is that God talked to Abram. We've seen God talk to Abram several times. He spoke to him in Genesis 12. He spoke to him in Genesis 13, in Genesis 14, in Genesis 15. And then he didn't in Genesis 16. And now he's going to talk to him again in Genesis 17. God is very interested in this man, Abram. And if you remember from Genesis 12 and Genesis 15, God has made a covenant with Abram. And we went over that covenant last time, that he is going to give him a land. He promised him that whole land of between the river of Egypt and the river Euphrates, if you remember. So the river of Egypt is all the way down there. I'm not positive it's the Nile River, but it might be. So the river of Egypt down here, all the way to the river Euphrates, which right now is, pretty much the whole country of Iraq and Kuwait and some northern Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And this whole land is going to belong to the Jews. It doesn't right now, but it will. That is God's covenant to Abraham, that I will give you that land. That was the first part of the covenant. The second part of the covenant was I will give you a seed. I'll make you a father of many nations, right? And there was a problem. Abram was 85 years old and he didn't have a kid, right? He didn't have a son. And, well, your time has passed, Too late is what most people would say, but God gave him a promise. And the Bible says in Romans 4 that Abram believed God. He was strong in faith. And we see the third thing. There was the land, there was the seed, and the third thing, he said, I will bless thee. And in thee shall all nations of the earth be blessed, is what he said. So a land, a seed, and a blessing were covenanted to Abram. And he repeated that in Genesis 15. In Genesis chapter 16, if you remember, Abram's 85 years old, and he doesn't have a boy yet. And Sarah starts thinking up, hey, we can make this happen. And she gives Abram Hagar as a concubine, Hagar the Egyptian as a concubine, and Abram has a half-Jew, half-Egyptian son named Ishmael, who becomes the father of many nations. He's not the fulfilled son. He's not the seed that God promised. He's the one that they took into their own hands, and they committed sin and made a child out of an inappropriate relationship, which should not have happened. And to this day, the world is paying for that sin. Ishmael is still causing problems over there in the Middle East. And, that's because they decided they were going to take things into their own hands. To this day, the Jews would have had a whole lot better history if Ishmael wasn't there, being a bad brother, and vice versa a little bit. So, Genesis chapter 17. Here we are. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9. Wow. So Abram was 86 when Ishmael was born, and now he's 99. So how many years have passed?
13.
13 years since Ishmael was born. Ishmael's a 13-year-old boy. 13 years. They took things into their own hands 13 years ago, and now he's 99, and now more than ever, I'll bet you he's thinking, where's the seed you promised, Lord? If Ishmael's not it, who is? When Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect. He's reminding him, this isn't just a relationship where you get to do whatever you want. No, I want you to walk before me and be thou perfect. I want you to do right. Look at verse 2. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram did what? Abram fell on his face. And God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. So when people see that, they'll go, I wonder what the Hebrew word there is. Abraham, And what does that mean? Let me look up in a Hebrew dictionary. You don't need a Hebrew dictionary. What does Abraham mean? Father of many nations. Abraham. Clear, plain as day. That's what it means. So how do you know? Because God wrote it right there. For a father of many nations have I made thee. God changed a few people's names in the Bible. You might be able to think of some more. He changed Abram to Abraham. Next, about 10 verses from now, he's going to change Sarai to what? Sarah. Right. He changed this one right here, Jacob. What did he tell him his new name would be? Yeah, Israel. And Simon Peter, Jesus told him his name would be what? Cephas. A stone. And God always has a purpose with these. He changes people's names to show meaning. There's a reason. Right here, he changed Abram's name, his whole identity. The thing people call you is going to change. You say, why? Because I'm going to fulfill my word. You've been a man with only one son, and that son's illegitimate, But I'm going to change your name so that people call you the father of many nations. You say, why in the world would the Lord do that? To be an additional promise to him, another sign to him that, hey, I'm going to fulfill my word. You just be patient and wait on me. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful. That's verse 6. And I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Is that true? Absolutely. Abram had more than just Israel, right? He had Jacob and Esau. Wait. He had Isaac and Ishmael. Sorry, Abram had Ishmael and Isaac. And Isaac had multiple nations come from him. He had Jacob, which are the Israelites, and he had Esau, who are the Edomites. That's a whole nother nation. Abram had Ishmael, the Ishmaelites, who made many nations of people. The Saudi Arabians, the Iraqis, fill in the blank. These people are from Abraham. He is the father of many nations. It's true today. And his name rings true as father of many nations. Even the Muslims, all the Muslims in the world today, which I know it's one of the biggest religions in the world, one of the fastest growing, because they have babies like it's their job, and we don't. So they're outpacing everybody. Minnesota is about 3/4 taken up with them, it seems like. Everywhere they go, they plant themselves and they find good jobs, and then they just have children on children on children, and that's a part of their plan, is to go somewhere, to outpopulate the people and take over. That's what they want. What they call it is jihad, the Muslims. They want what they call it a holy war. And here is the Muslim faith, right here. We are the children of Abraham, and we believe in Allah and Muhammad, his prophet. God is Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. And they believe if you don't believe it, you're an infidel. And there's 2 chances for an infidel. 2 chances. 1, we take you over peacefully and you be our slaves. 2, if you don't accept that, we kill you. That is the Muslim faith and what they believe about evangelism, how they intend to take over the world. That is their plan. That's in the Quran. That's their basic teaching. And that is descendants of Abraham through Ishmael. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And God said, I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come of thee. Yeah, it's happened. Not all of them are good, though. An awful lot of them are bad. But good kings came. David and Solomon came from Abraham. All the other kings you read about in the Bible are from, all the Jewish kings are from Abraham. So he says, and I will establish my covenant, verse 7, and I will establish my covenant between thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant. Now, this is important right here. There are 2 different types of covenants in the Bible. There are conditional covenants, and there are unconditional covenants. A conditional covenant is something like this. If you do this, then I will give you this. God covenanted with Moses and the people of Israel and said, if you will obey my law, then I will give you the land of Canaan. That was a conditional covenant. He said, only if. And he covenanted this in Deuteronomy. If you keep my law, I'll let you stay in the land. That was a covenant from God to the Jews. Now, to this day, are the Jews there in Canaan? No, and they spent a long time not there at all, right? God kicked them out. He had the Babylonians capture them, and then some got to go back, but they never really recovered. You say, God covenanted that he would keep them there. He didn't say, I'll keep you there no matter what. He said, I will keep you there if you keep my law. There was a condition on the covenant. There are other covenants in the Bible that are not conditional. An unconditional covenant, and what God calls it right here, is an everlasting covenant. Everlasting covenant. That's this right here. Doesn't matter how badly you disobey me, Abraham. Doesn't matter how bad your descendants disobey me. I'm going to keep my covenant. Now, this is extremely important. You say, why? Because if this covenant that God made with Abraham is conditional, if it's dependent upon the Jews' obedience, then the Bible prophecy won't come true. If the Jews can fail their part in this covenant, if they can lose this covenant, then all of the prophecies in the Bible about Israel in the future, about the millennium, about Jesus Christ reigning in his kingdom, are not true. God's covenant with the Jews to give them this piece of land and to give them a blessing and to make Abraham a father of many nations is unconditional. It is everlasting, and no matter what any Jew does on this planet, no matter how wickedly they treated him in the Old Testament, no matter how badly they rebelled, God makes it very clear this covenant is unconditional, and for Abraham's sake, for the covenant that I made with him, I will fulfill that promise. Paul even mentions it several times. The gifts and calling of God are without repentance. These Jews, the gifts that they're going to get from God, God is never going to change his mind. He is going to give them this piece of dirt. No matter what Iraq and Iran and Russia and China and America and Egypt and Saudi Arabia, no matter what they all try to do, Israel will get that land because God made an unconditional covenant, an everlasting covenant with Abraham. And that's important because he brings that up a lot. If you remember, while we were going through Isaiah and Jeremiah and the minor prophets and Ezekiel, a lot of times he's going along there talking to the Jews and he's saying things like this. Jerusalem, you did wicked. You acted just like your Sodom and Gomorrah. You killed people. You murdered the prophets I sent to you. You've done wickedly, so I've sent you into captivity. And then he'll say this. Yet, for the sake of my covenant with Abraham, I will bring you back. He reminds them time and time again, I made a promise with Abraham that I will never, ever break. And because of that, I will bring you back into that land. And to this day, April 7th, 2023, to this day, God hasn't fully fulfilled that covenant. That's a part of the reason why we know that he's going to deal with the Jews in the future, that the church doesn't go through the tribulation because we've got a different deal than them. Our deal is that when we get translated out of here, we get to be with Jesus Christ. The Jews' deal is that they get that piece of dirt on this earth. That's not our deal. It's different. That's his covenant with Abraham. And thankfully, because we're in Christ, the Jew, we get to partake in that, and we'll get to reign with him in that government. But this covenant is unconditional. It is everlasting. And he said there in verse 7, I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. Man, it's interesting right there. To Moses, he said, you better keep my law, and if you do, I'll give you these good things. I'll let you stay in the land. Right here, it's different. He said, I'm going to give you the land. So because of that, keep my covenant, do what I say. But the difference is, even if Abraham had disobeyed God, he still would have gotten the promise. This is an unconditional covenant. I want you to know the difference there between a conditional and unconditional covenant. Verse 10, this is my covenant which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generations. He that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money, must needs be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. Simple. Circumcise your boy on the 8th day. That's his covenant with Abraham. Abraham, I'm asking one thing of you. When your boys turn 8 days old, circumcise the flesh of their foreskin. So simple, so plain, so clear. Why? Why? That seems so random, seems so odd and strange. You say, why in the world did God ask Abraham to do that? Well, let's ask the Bible. First, there in verse 11, he said, ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. So when God gives him circumcision, he says, this circumcision is going to be a token between me and you. It's a picture, it's a sign of the covenant betwixt me and you. I'm going to turn to Romans chapter 4 and verse 8. In Romans 4:8, Paul is talking about this moment right here. And he says this. It's not 4:8. Oh, yes. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin. Cometh this blessedness then upon the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. How was it then reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision. Listen, and he received the sign of circumcision. He received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had, yet being uncircumcised, that he might be the father of all them that believe, though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed unto them also. So, this is important. Abram, in, I believe it's chapter 15 of Genesis, it says he believed God and he counted it to him for righteousness, right? Yeah. Abraham's faith was reckoned to him for righteousness. In chapter 15, 13 years before this, 13 years before God told him to get circumcised, God counted him righteous. What did Abram do to earn his righteousness in Genesis 15? He believed God. Did he do any works? Did he keep any law? Did he get circumcised back then? No. When he was 85 years old, he believed God, and he counted it to Abraham for righteousness. You say, why? So that anyone after Abraham on planet Earth could know that God gives righteousness to people based on faith. And then he made sure he waited 13 years till he told Abraham to be circumcised. So that when you and I come along, Gentiles, and we say, do I need to be circumcised to believe in God and be righteous? Do I need to follow circumcision to be righteous? God, in Romans 4, points us to Abraham and says, Abram was righteous 13 years before he got circumcised. And you can be righteous without circumcision too. You say, how? By faith. The same faith that Abraham had. So then the question is, why did God bring along circumcision? Because Abraham in two different ways as a father to us all. First of all, he's a spiritual father to everyone who has faith in God. If you have faith in God, just like Abraham, then you are one of Abraham's sons by faith. And he is our father because of the faith that he had. Now, he's also that's the spiritual side. On the physical side, he's the physical father of the Jews, the Hebrews, the people of Israel. The circumcision is for them. The faith is for you and me. The circumcision is for them. So God waited 13 years to make sure there's a gap here, there's a difference. You don't have to be circumcised to be right with God. You just have to have faith. You say, what in the world is the purpose of the circumcision? It was a token, it was a sign, it was a seal. Now, who requires a sign? Jews require a sign. Do you and I need to be circumcised as a seal of our righteousness? No, we have a seal. We are sealed by something else. Who's that? The Holy Spirit. We are sealed by the Holy Spirit of God. It says in Ephesians 1:13, whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption. We don't need circumcision. That's a thing that is done away. It's in the past. It's not for you and me anymore. It was a sign, a seal, a token for the Jews, not for you and me. Very clear in the Scripture. Paul makes that abundantly clear. Thank the Lord. It's not something Christians have to do. That was Genesis 17 and verse 14. Look at verse 15. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Oh, good. Okay. So, Abram has a son, Ishmael, through Hagar. But now God is promising, no, I'm going to give you a son through Sarah. I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? I mean, hey, reasonable question. At this time, people weren't living to 900 years old like Adam. They were dying pretty young. You know, they were dying at 100, 120. And Adam's got a good question here. Can a 100-year-old man have a baby? Goodness, no. Obvious answer is no. So he laughed. Why? Because that's never been heard of in Abraham's time. You know, that's silly. Verse 18, and Abraham said unto God, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. You know, that's bold. Abraham was bold right there. God told him, Sarah will have a son. And Abraham fell on his face. He laughed. Why don't we I've already got Ishmael, okay? He's 13 years old. Let's do this thing through Ishmael, Lord, okay? Let's go through him. What does the Lord say? You know, that takes boldness to say that to the Lord. Goodness. And God said, Sarah, thy wife. Ooh, I bet that stung right there. Yeah, not that concubine that you cheated with there. Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed. Not Ishmael, who's just a bastard son. God wanted Isaac, who was a son indeed. And thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. So God was selective. Abraham was chosen. And Abraham had two sons, right? Ishmael and Isaac. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. Did Ishmael get to be the chosen seed?
No.
No. God chose Abraham, and then he chose Isaac. And Isaac had Esau first, and then Jacob. Esau was the firstborn. Did Esau get chosen? No. God chose Jacob. So, time and time again, throughout the Old Testament, he says, I am the God of thy fathers, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He makes it very clear. It's not just all of Abraham's descendants. The Arabs don't get to be partakers of this covenant. And the Edomites don't get to be partakers of this covenant, Esau's people. It's just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Through them, that seed, and the 12 tribes that came forth out of Jacob. Look at verse 20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. And that's happened. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house, born in the house and bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. Now, that's a good testimony right there. God said, here's my covenant, I want you to be circumcised. Every male that's born in your house or that you own. And what does Abraham do? Walk around for 2 or 3 years? No. I mean, I'll bet you as soon as God was gone, he turned around and went, sharpen the knives, boys. We got something to do, okay? He was very quick to obey the Lord. It is time to obey right now. Don't delay in obeying God. Abraham right away was ready to obey. And if you've read later on in the Bible, there's a story with 2 of Jacob's sons, and they trick a whole city of people into being circumcised who didn't need to be circumcised. And it says they were sore for several days. I mean, it's not, especially as an adult man, it's not going to be a comfortable procedure. And I don't believe they had anesthesiologists to help out in the wilderness of Mamre, or in Hebron there where they were. So it's not the end of the world, but it's a serious thing. You're putting your whole household through some pain, and it's a serious covenant to make with God, this circumcision. And Abraham was showing God he's serious about his relationship with him. Look at chapter 18 and verse 1. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes, and behold, and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. Whoa. 3 men stood by Abraham. And it says, the Lord appeared unto him. So one of these men is the Lord. 3 men appeared. One, we've got the Lord appeared unto him. Who do you suppose the other 2 are?
Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
That's a good guess, but the Holy Spirit never has a body. And later in the story, we see that 2 angels go down to Sodom. So we've got the Lord, and we've got 2 angels with him. 3 men stood by him, Abraham. And when he saw them, what did he do? He ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. That's good right there. If you saw the Lord, you shouldn't, I wonder who that is. Oh, that's God. Stand around, wait till he comes to you. No, there's the Lord. I'm not waiting for him to get here. I'm going to him. And he ran and he fell down on his face. He gave God the respect that he deserved. He bowed himself toward the ground. And here's a devotional application right here. You've got the Lord in your house every single day. Do you just stand around and do other stuff and ignore him? Or do you run and get on your face in front of him every single day? It's important. He's there trying to talk to you. And said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. Here's a question. What is Abraham living in right here? Does he have a big, nice mansion? He lives in a tent. You remember what we said about Cain? Did he and his people live in tents? No. They went and built cities, and they built buildings and made towers, and they liked cities. God wanted people to not build cities and not get together. He wanted them to be farmers, which Abraham was, and he wanted them to not be gathering together into cities. He wanted them to spread out, which is exactly what Abraham was doing. Abraham was doing what the Lord wanted, and the Lord was blessing him for it. Verse 6, and Abraham did what? He moseyed on over to the kitchen? No, he hastened. He was in a hurry. The king's business requireth haste. He hastened into the tent unto Sarah. So where was Sarah? In the tent. And said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd. and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hasted to dress it. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door which was behind them. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, and well stricken in age. And it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women, meaning she wasn't able to bear a child anymore. As women, you hit that age at some point in life where you're not able to have kids anymore. Therefore, Sarah laughed. Does it say she laughed out loud? No. She laughed within herself. We all do that. You know what that's like. A little chuckle on the inside. She laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? She just on the inside, she was laughing about, I'm going to have a kid. Me and Abraham will have a kid. He uses a walker, okay? He's old. And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh? Whoa. Where did she laugh? Out loud so the Lord could hear? No. She laughed on the inside and he heard it. You know what that tells you? The Bible says the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. God sees inside your heart, and the thoughts that you think on your own, the things that you do when you think you're alone, he sees every single one of them. There's nothing you can do on the inside that God won't see and that you won't have to answer for at the judgment. That's something to think about. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, Psalm 19:14. You need to memorize it. It says, Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Very important. The thoughts of your heart are in front of God's eyes. And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? And that phrase is repeated 2 other times throughout the Bible. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. There's a couple things there. One, Sarah thought she got away with it because she laughed in her heart. What's the first thing she said? She didn't laugh out loud. She laughed within herself. She didn't go, ha, ha, ha. So she tried to get by. Here's what Sarah looked like when he said that. She was probably working on some meal right there or something. Maybe she was washing dishes. And she heard, Sarah shall have a son. And here's probably what was on her face. You know what? The laughing was inside. And when he said, why did she laugh? She tried to get away with a little loophole. I didn't laugh. She probably kept a plain face. I didn't laugh. What does God say? Yikes. Nay, but thou didst laugh. Just because you didn't do it on the outside doesn't mean God didn't see it on the inside. That should wake you up. The thoughts that you are thinking matter. The things that you let go on in your heart matter, and God sees them. And if God says you did something, the first thing out of your mouth doesn't need to be, no, I didn't. Yeah, God said you did, okay? Leave it at that. Let him be the one who tells you what's right. Don't try to correct him. Nay, but thou didst laugh. Oh, I'm sorry. It says, Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not. Why did she deny? Why did she lie? For she was afraid. Say, why does anybody lie? Because you're afraid. When your dad comes to you and says, son, did you take... Here's a true story from my life. Did you take your finger and stick it into that delicious chocolate cake Mom made to take a test? Because nobody else has been in the kitchen this morning, except for you. That Sunday morning. I was hungry. I was a fat kid. And I stuck my finger in a piece of chocolate cake and tasted it. It was wonderful. I would do it 10 times over. What I wouldn't do again is lie to my dad like I did. So I lied to him. He knew I had lied. And, I got a good, strong spanking, which is good. You say, why did you lie, Daniel? I was afraid. I was afraid that he would spank me. I was afraid I'd be in trouble. That's why people lie. You lie because you're scared. You're afraid of the punishment that's going to come for telling the truth. But listen, it always pays off to tell the truth. You might get in a little trouble. You might have a little hard time, but it's better to deal with a hard time in the truth than to deal with the fact that you're a liar. It's hard to live with yourself if you're a liar. It's not a good life. Look at verse 16. And the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. That verse right there ought to be in a journal or in a Bible circled. That's an important verse for any man who has children anywhere. Listen, this is what God said about Abraham, and you should hope and pray that God says this about you. For I know him, that he will command his children. Command? Dads are supposed to be nice, Dads are supposed to be sweet and fun. No, that he will command his children. Command, like a general. Command them. Now, Dad, you should be fun. You should enjoy your kids, and your kids should enjoy you. Got to be a lot of love. But listen, don't forget that you're in charge, and you're responsible for what they do. And in the New Testament, it says that you are to rule over your house. Rule, like a commander. Command. That he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment. That ought to be the testimony of your house. And if people say, they're nothing but, goody two-shoe, Bible thumpers, they're Christian people, they never go out and have any fun. Well, I don't care if people say that, as long as God says he commanded his children right, he did justice and judgment. That's what I want my testimony to be as a household in God's eyes. Nothing else matters. Verse 20, and the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. That's interesting right there. Do you remember when Cain killed Abel? God came down and said, Cain, what hast thou done? Abel's blood crieth to me from the ground. Whenever innocent blood is shed in the Bible says that innocent blood cries out to God. Like, justice, I need justice. Innocent blood has been shed. It's crying out to God. Something wrong is happening down here. Aren't you the just judge? Why isn't there justice? When there's injustice, it cries out to God. And right here it happens again. In the Sodom and Gomorrah, there was wickedness happening, and the land was crying out to God. And God's going down now to see, all right, I'm going to go physically make my presence known, and I'm going to go see firsthand, is it really as wicked as, I'm hearing? And obviously God knew, but he wanted to go down and show up as a physical witness. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom. Those two men. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Abraham's throwing some big words at God here, and he's saying, I know you want to go destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. I know they're wicked, but listen, let's say if you find 50 righteous people there, won't you spare them? Just because you're just. Why would you destroy the righteous with the wicked? What if you find 50, God? And Abraham knows. He saved them. He went out to war and saved all their hinds and brought them back. And he knows Lot, and they had contact, and he knows just how wicked this place is. 26, and the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. Okay, so Abraham doesn't have too much confidence. He's thinking, I don't know if we can find 50 righteous people. So, Lord, how about 45? Verse 29. And he spake unto him yet again and said, peradventure there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall be 30 found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, Behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Peradventure there shall be 20 found there. I mean, he kept working his way down, didn't he? Talk about trying to haggle a deal with the Lord. Goodness, he's from 50 all the way down to 20. I will not destroy it for 20's sake. Verse 32, and he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. Sodom was a wicked, wicked place. All the men of Sodom were wicked. The Bible says, we've read it, Genesis 13:13. And the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And Abraham knew it. He knew there's not going to be 50 or 45 or 40 or 30 or 20. There might not even be 10. But I've already pushed my luck 6 times with the Lord. I'm not going to try it again, you know. He probably was wise in keeping his mouth shut. Abraham just wanted his cousin Lot to be safe, his nephew. He wanted to take care of his nephew. That was in his heart. That was in his mind, for sure. This right here is a good example for you and me. Even if you've got a family member, if they're righteous, and the Bible says, just Lot vexed his righteous soul. Lot was a righteous man. He was a just man. But he had made a bad decision in living in Sodom. Obviously, a very bad decision. And it says he vexed his righteous soul from day to day. You know, that city tugged on him and tried to make him wicked. And Abraham knew it. You might have a family member who you know they're somewhere they shouldn't be. But you know what you don't need to do? Lord, send down hellfire and punish him and bring him back to you through punishment. No. We as Christians, we ought to love mercy. Love mercy. Yeah, he's doing wrong, but so have you. Maybe ask the Lord to have a little mercy on him. Maybe ask the Lord to get him out of the city before he destroys it. Get what I'm saying? If you've got a family member who's just doing absolutely terrible, pray that the Lord would save them out of it instead of destroy them with it. You know, there are times in the Bible where people like David say, God, destroy my enemies, burn them with fire, and don't give them a second chance. There are other times where we are to love our enemies, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. And Abraham's a really wonderful example there. There's one verse that I forgot to go back to here in Genesis 18 and verse 12. When Sarah laughed within herself, it says, Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? That's interesting right there. My Lord being old also. 1 Peter 3 actually comments on this verse right here, and I wanted to take you to that commentary. 1 Peter 3 and verse 5. So Sarah called Abraham what? My husband? No, she called him my Lord. And in 1 Peter 3, he mentions that. It says, For after this manner, in the old time, the holy women also who trusted in God. So, say you're a woman and you want to be holy and you want to trust in God, Jesus Christ is giving you an example right here in Sarah. The holy women also who trusted in God adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husbands. Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, you know, he went in there and said, I need you to make 3 cakes out of fine things. What did she do? You think I'm your personal servant? No, she obeyed him, calling him Lord. It mentions it right there. The thing that came out of Sarah's mouth, you know, even in her heart, even though she was laughing at the idea of what God had said, she was reverencing her husband. She called him Lord. And Peter comments on that and says, hey, women, today, if you want to be holy and righteous like holy women of old, you want to be an old-fashioned Bible-believing woman, reverence your husband like Sarah did, even calling him Lord. And it doesn't say you have to call your husband Lord. And I'd sure feel uncomfortable if I woke up in the morning and Karen said, what would you like for me to do to you today, Lord? You know, how would you like me to cook, Lord? You know? But what he's hitting at here is the spirit. She held her husband as her master, which I'm not saying you need to and you don't have to. But the Bible does say reverence your husband, and it does say submit yourselves to him as unto the Lord. And a Christian man ought to have that same submission to Jesus Christ. But even if he doesn't, a wife should still have this spirit. And Sarah, you say, nobody does that on the earth today. Well, you've got one example in Sarah. And there's women on the earth today. I've met a few who really believe God and really submit to their husbands the way they ought to and really respect them and reverence them. And it's very important, and you ought to. And in Hebrews 11:11, one more encouraging thing there about Sarah. She's a good example for a woman. Hebrews 11:11, it says, she made it into the hall of faith here in Hebrews 11. It says, through faith also, Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed. Now, my wife just had a baby. She's 27? I'm glad she's not here for me to ask that question. She's 27, and she just had a baby in December. And, it's not easy for a woman to have a baby. I know that now. I understand that now. That's not an easy thing to go through. And I can't imagine being 90 years old and having to go through that. I mean, goodness gracious. You don't have the strength of your youth anymore to endure something like that. But look, by faith, through faith also, Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age. Why? Because she judged him faithful who had promised. Man, that's a good example for a woman right there, or for a man too. You can go through anything. It doesn't matter how hard it is. If God wants you to go through it, you can go through it if you just judge him faithful. You count him faithful. You say, I don't think I can physically have a baby, Lord. But you know what? You said I'm going to, so I'm going to trust you. You said, Lord, you'd provide all my needs. And I see a whole lot of no money in the bank account and big bills to pay. I don't understand how it's going to happen. But Lord, you said you shall provide all my need. And you know what? I judge you faithful. That ought to be your attitude. Every single person in here. And Sarah's a good example to us all. That was Genesis chapter 18 and 17. Any questions at all about any of that? I have questions like, what did he look like? And what did the angels look like? And what were their names? And was it Michael and Gabriel? I wonder things like that. Any questions? Okay. I hope this was a help to you. And if not, I'm sorry. The word of the Lord should have been a help to you. Anything I said that wasn't true, hopefully you forget that. And